Hello, bSQL developers. In my last video, I went over how to use set transaction query time to look at and reference a different state of the database. Today, I'm going to give you a tutorial on bSQL transactions and how they are used in the system. So what we've done here is we've started a session on the Lyft database, and we'll give that a run, and we're going to start a transaction. And a transaction really represents a single unit of work to be done on the database. And it offers a really good and logical starting point to do a lot of work. So if I want to make changes that I'm not sure I want to have committed to the database, I will start a transaction. By default, this transaction is always going to commit this open transaction. That's because we have a auto commit variable, and that is defaulted to be set to true. So let's go ahead and we'll set that auto commit variable to false. So we'll set auto commit equal to false, and that will tell the connection that anything run inside the start transaction statement or within this transaction does not need to be committed until explicitly a commit is run or a commit is not run and that work is undone by a rollback statement. So now I'm going to go ahead and illustrate that by doing a unit of work. So I'm going to start by looking into my stations. So I'm going to select station ID from stations. We're going to go ahead and apply a filter to that, and we're going to return the first 10 records. So I'll go ahead and give that a run. So these are records that exist in the current state of the system. Berkeley stations BKB7. So I'm going to go ahead and do a unit of work, run a transaction within my open transaction, or it's not really running a transaction within the open transaction, it is using that transaction that I've started to do a unit of work. So we're going to discontinue station using the station ID. And that station ID has the value of, so let's just pick this first one, BKA3. So let's go ahead and discontinue BKA3, and we'll give that a run. So that executed correctly. And now if we select from stations, filter the first 10, that BKA3 station is no longer going to be in that current state. But what if we made a change that we did not necessarily want to make? Well, because technically we're still in an open transaction and auto commit is set to false, this was never committed. And if you remember in the previous videos going over mutations, a discontinue statement is really just an append to the file that adds a tombstone record to notify the system that that record does not exist anymore in the current state. So let's go ahead and roll that back. So we're going to run a rollback, and that's going to undo whatever was done after this start transaction statement. And now we're going to select the same thing. And we can see now BK3 is back into that stations table. So that rollback doesn't undo, and it does any redos necessary, and it actually changes the actual file. But that's okay because these stations that haven't been committed yet are still in this kind of limbo zone where we don't know if we should commit it or not. So they're not actually sent to the immutable archive. That is the backbone to BlockPoint's multi-version database. Another command I'd like to go over is the checkpoint. What the checkpoint does is it cleans the log. So every database, this database has a log that keeps track of the transactions that could be potentially rolled back. So they use that information stored in the log to compute the rollback when I ran rollback. So what a checkpoint does is it goes ahead and it cleans out that log file, removing all atomic transactions so that that rollback will be faster. So the system automatically checkpoints at a certain point after the log has reached a certain size. But this is just a way that we can manually checkpoint. So we'll go ahead and give that a run. Nothing really interesting happens here. You can see that it ran successfully. And that's all I have for you today. It's basics on how to use transactions with the start transaction command, what a transaction looks like in the bSQL programming language. And in my next video, I'll be going over cryptography and system keys. So I'll see you then.